Welcome back to another episode of PB Ballers and Fighting Stripes. I'm your host Albert, joined again by Michael Welch. Today we got a really special episode. Big news coming down the pipe, ladies and gentlemen. Hong Myung-bo has been reappointed the manager of the South Korea national team. A 5-month search has ended. Mike, when you woke up in the States and you saw this news, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I immediately looked at your group chat and I was like, whoa. Y'all have been talking about this for about 2 hours now. Can't say that I was super surprised because, let me just be honest, right? Im Sang, the guy that was running the search for the past, I guess, a couple weeks, he went out to meet with Gus Poyet and he went out to meet with David Wagner. Two, names where, they're not famous guys. They're not super famous managers, where if he were to appoint them, all the Korean fans would be like, oh my God, we got him? So I was not surprised that this guy went back to Korea and was like, maybe I should just try to convince the most famous Korean manager there is to actually take the job. And so it's not surprising, and I think it's kind of safe. What were your thoughts, Albert?
Disappointment in a way. It's so uncreative, and this is something that people, not just me but other people, have been harping about for months now. Is when we saw the process and we saw the fact that they weren't hiring someone, when we saw that they were taking 5 months to make a hire, it seemed like they were either gunning for Hwang Sun-hong to get the job, but after he failed to qualify for the Olympics and pretty much embarrassed himself on a national stage, they kind of reversed course and said, okay, who's another domestic guy that we can give the job to? They looked at Kim Do-hoon for 2 games, and from what I've seen from my sources, they did offer Kim Do-hoon the job. He declined the offer, and when Kim Do-hoon declined, they went back to, I think, the guy they wanted all along from the beginning, which is Hong Myung-bo. The excellent Korean football reporter Steve Han has told me before that, in a sense, the KFA has always wanted Hong to come back as the manager for the national team. He's very well respected within the organization. He has personal relationships with all these players. Mong-gyu loves him. But I think for me, it's like, there's a reason you break up with an ex-girlfriend, I think. And the reasons why you broke up are probably still going to be there when you get back together. In some cases, it does work out, right? I'm not saying like all relationships are doomed to fail. But I think that for people who don't know, Hong Myung-bo was the former manager of the national team back at the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. Totally disastrous exit in terms of his man management, his tactical choices. He got everything wrong at the time. And while I think that, managers do deserve another chance that they can evolve, there are still a lot of red flags regarding Hong Myung-bo, regardless of how well he's done in the K-League with Ulsan Hyundai. That would have led me, if I was in charge of the KFA, to hire someone else, and preferably a foreigner. That's not to say Hong is a bad manager. He's a very capable manager who's well respected. He's a legend in Korean football. But if you had 5 months to hire someone, and this was the best you could do, David Wagner, Gus Poyet, and Hong Myung-bo, somebody needs to be fired at the KFA, or they need to hire someone else to look for more qualified candidates. It's just really disappointing, and I think all along, whether it's fair or not, we can accuse the KFA of just having a master plan to hire a domestic coach, and all along this is the guy that they wanted.
Can I play devil's advocate real quick on one point that you made, okay? So you were talking about how let's say they could have gotten someone better, or they could have hired somebody to find them someone better. So we made a video about this last week. When the U.S. Soccer Federation undertook their search to find a new manager after they had gotten rid of Greg Berhalter, they hired a consulting firm called Soccerology, right? And they paid a certain amount of money to that consulting firm to help them find candidates. Guess what also happened when they did that search with paying consultants? They ended up at the same exact person. So it doesn't necessarily always help. That's all I'm saying, bro. That's all I'm saying.
They should have called me or Steve. They should have called.
Oh yeah, they could have called you. Yeah, for sure. They could have called Steve too. That would have worked great. But would they have? Would they have, Albert? That's all
this is Mike, your point stands. The devil's advocate point isn't wrong. But my problem is, look at the people they put to look for these coaches. Chung Hae-sung and Im.
Mm-hmm.
Qualified, former players, look at the list they came up with. It's just so uncreative. And I'm not saying we can go out and hire a Guardiola or a Klopp or an Ancelotti, but the football world is still big enough to the point where if you look at the final 12 list that was leaked earlier today, it could have still been a lot better than that. What my problem is that they were never serious about hiring a foreigner. They kind of dipped their toe in the pool and said, oh, well, let's see the temperature, how it is, maybe see who's interested, a few nibbles here and there. But during the negotiation process, it never seemed like they were serious. And to me, what it smells like is that they dipped their toe in the pool and said, you know what? I don't like the temperature, or something's wrong. Something's off with this. I don't like this. I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to pull out and go back to what I know, what's safe, in Hong Myung-bo. If you had been serious in your efforts to at least get one of them, I would have been okay with going back to Hong if that's the conclusion that you want to make. But the problem is I feel like there wasn't a good faith search done. And I think that's the main issue I have with this. Shoving aside the disrespect to the K-League and the Ulsan Hyundai fans, poaching a coach mid-season when the season doesn't end all. The regular season isn't end until October. Korea plays their next friendlies or their next qualifying matches in September. So shoving aside the disrespect to the domestic league, just their attitude and the way they would have about this is pretty abhorrent. It's not to say Hong might not be a good hire. He may be, but just the whole organizational structure and the way they go about business is rotten. And maybe I'm going too far, but I think this represents an issue not just in Korean football, but in Korean society, the way their companies work, the communication issues that we have, the inability to organize a proper search. And it shows, in my opinion, you need more different voices in the KFA. You need more Korean Americans there, Korean Canadians. You need more people from Europe there. So I think a lot of these people have gotten way too comfortable in their positions. And there's a bit of a hubris, I think, that infects the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with anything you said. There's a lot of really good points in there. I don't know when I'm going to use this point, but I feel like maybe now is a decent time to use this. But the other thing that I think we should do in the next 1 or 2 minutes is just rattle off the names that made the 12 candidate list, because that's important. For me, okay, I play a lot of golf. Let's say you hit it in the bunker and you could chip it in and make a birdie by doing something crazy, right? And that would be hiring some foreign guy that's like, you don't know what you're going to get. But getting up and down, getting that par is hiring Hong Myung-bo here, because if you go for that fucking birdie and you go in another bunker or you go over the green or whatever, and that foreign manager actually turns out to not work out, you've made a double bogey. You've ruined your day. So this is just a safe choice. That's all I'm going to say about it. Like, sometimes safety first is important in sports. That's all I'm going to say. But now let's do it, bro. Let's get into it. Let's look at this list of candidates because it's not great.
Our man Jason was able to dig up this list via the Korean YouTuber Feno. I don't believe it has been confirmed, and I don't think the KFA will confirm it. But
why would they?
Yeah, the source is the names seem believable. So yeah, I'll let Mike rattle off the names.
Yeah, you can give me any reactions you have when I say these names, okay, brother? Hong Myung-bo, the guy that got hired. Kim Do-hoon.
Trash.
Ruben Amorim.
Never happening. Unrealistic.
Gus Poyet.
Okay, I could live with it, but the best you could do for 5 months?
Graham Arnold.
Stay in Australia.
Yeah, I wouldn't want him either. I really wouldn't. I've never really been that impressed with Australia since Ange Postecoglou left there.
No, he's not a bad manager, Arnold. He gets results, but for the style of ball that he plays and just the cultural fit, I just think he's a good manager for what Australia need, but he wouldn't work in Korea.
Oh, yeah. All right, Jesus Casas.
Bring. But he has a contract with the Iraqi Federation, and I believe Iraq is in our qualifying group. So if he had weaseled out
that would be funny.
Imagine morally
they
speaking,
are in our qualifying group.
Yeah, morally speaking, it wouldn't be good. Like, I'd be thankful if he wanted to come, but that would be problematic, and I don't think it would be a good look for the rest of the Confederation. So, I mean, logistically, not possible. Yeah.
Felix Sanchez? I don't even know who that is.
He is the manager for Ecuador. Ecuador, pretty awful showing at the Copa America. Totally toothless in attack. I believe he was sacked a few days ago. Former manager of Qatar. Not a bad manager by any means. Probably be on my list to interview, but I don't know if I would have given him the job. Yeah.
All right. Vladimir Petkovic.
That's the guy I wanted. That was the name I floated about 4 months ago when Klinsmann was fired. I tweeted at the KFA and I said, "Hey, this is a guy we should take a look at." Obviously, I
Maybe
don't know
that's
if
how
this
he
game-
got on the list, brother.
Maybe I doubt it, but maybe. But that's a name that I would love. Former Swiss manager who gets a small country with decent,
Mhm.
hardworking players to the round of 16. You know, no guarantee they'll win anything, but they always qualify out of the group stage and they play hard and they don't beat themselves, which is what this team needs, right? Because we
Mhm.
shot ourselves in the foot against Jordan because we didn't have any tactics. So Pekovic to me would have been the perfect fit, but alas, he went to Algeria. And if you're going to make the argument that he wouldn't have come to Korea, that's crazy. I think most managers would pick to come to Seoul instead of going to Algeria. All respect to the Algerian team. I think they have great history, but they should have moved faster on this because he was somebody in high demand.
Mhm. Danny Blind.
He's Daley Blind's father, was an assistant coach with the Netherlands at the 2014 World Cup with Louis van Gaal. I just feel like they put his name there because he's Dutch.
Okay. Frank de Boer.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, me neither.
No.
Nah. Pass on that one. Jose Moraes.
No. Former Gumboot coach, I believe. Bad just football eyesore tactics.
Yeah.
And bouncing around somewhere in Asia, I think. Or maybe Middle
Hard
Middle
pass
East.
for me.
Yeah, no.
Last one. Oh, this one's wild. Mark Wilmots.
No. The Belgian version of Jurgen Klinsmann. He managed them at the 2014 World Cup, and then his real embarrassment was getting eliminated by Wales at the 2016 European Championships. So, no.
Yeah, you can't do that. No, I mean that's the list.
So this list is shit. Just yesterday, I believe I was talking to Mr. Hugo Perez, the former El Salvador manager. I'm not saying he's the greatest coach ever, but he's a respected manager in the Americas. I asked him, "Wait, would you ever come to Korea or Japan if they offered?" He's like, "Yeah, absolutely, I would." Seoul is a great city, amazing culture, hardworking teams. So the people, again, in the KFA who are assigned these jobs are either not taking their job seriously or they're so ingrained living in a bubble where they only think that they can go for certain candidates based on whatever metric they're using. I don't even know what. It's just disappointing, like I said, that this was the list they came up with after 5 months. It's just the process and the timeline has been rotten. I think we should also talk about the timeline of how this hire happened because that's also really shady as well.
I think so. I wanted to do a deep dive because I think the timeline of like how the KFA has gone rotten, it's longer than I think people are thinking of. If you're just going to say like, oh, the KFA went rotten when they hired Jurgen Klinsmann, that might not be far enough. Paolo Bento wasn't happy for a couple years. You guys saw his press conferences. He wasn't super happy about working for them. So something wasn't going right there. So let's go farther back than that. Okay. So for me, the line where I have to draw it where like it starts going rotten and things start going bad is kind of when Hong Myung-bo and Kim Pang-gon leave the KFA. After Hong Myung-bo left the national team after just a disastrous 2014 World Cup, he didn't actually leave the KFA. He was given a administrative role and he was tasked with like kind of, was he like an ambassador? Was he a technical director? Like, what do you think his job was?
I think he was an administrator.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, he was the dude that was like, we should actually make Kim Pang-gon the next technical director and put him in charge of finding the next manager after Shin Tae-yong at the 2018 World Cup, right? That was a very smart move because Kim Pang-gon, in a technical sense, like he decided on what kind of tactics he wanted to play. And he looked at the players that he had that the national team was calling up. And he said, what kind of tactics would they play? What kind of style would they play? And what manager could bring that out of them? And he was like, okay, I need to hire Paolo Bento. And for the 4 years that Paolo Bento was the manager, he developed a style, he developed a tactical system, a game plan, and it worked, right? So Kim Pang-gon did a good job. He succeeded in finding the right manager.
Kim Pang-gon wasn't treated very well, apparently, during his time at the KFA. He didn't really appreciate some of the things that were said to him. I believe one player even told him at one point, hey, like, what qualifications do you have again? Did you ever play for the national team? Like, why are you telling us what to do? So that kind of encapsulates like the way he was treated, and I think that it's part of the reason why he's gone to Southeast Asia and never really come back. Kind of similar to Shin Tae-yong as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see those guys coming back to work in Korea, either of them. But for me, when you think of like why the KFA is struggling to function properly at this moment, it's because someone with a vision like Kim Pang-gon is not there anymore. And so I could even say that it would probably be hard for Paolo Bento to do his job properly with the technical director that hired him not being there anymore. You kind of lose a little bit of leverage when you're talking to other people that work there, when the guy that brought you to do your job is no longer there for you, right? That's a big problem that he left. And one of the guys that the KFA brought in to replace Kim Pang-gon was Michael Muller. And Michael Muller, right, he came from Germany. He had worked at the DFB, which is the FA there. And his kind of role, and so we brought him over because we were like, oh, this guy knows how to rebuild national teams from the top all the way down, right? How has, like, in your mind, I got to ask this. How do you think the appointment of Michael Moore has even worked?
Well, it didn't work because he had tried to hire a coach after the World Cup, and Mong-gyu basically said, no, we're going to throw out your recommendations and hire Klinsmann instead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And after Klinsmann didn't work out, basically Mong-gyu scapegoated Muller and reassigned him or fired him. I don't even know if he's still at the KFA. In any case, he's not in a position of power. So he's been treated terribly. So it's hard for me to assess Muller's capabilities because I don't think he's the one who wanted to hire Jurgen Klinsmann in the first place.
We can say that maybe Michael Muller has had effect on our U20 national team doing well whenever they go to the World Cup, possibly. But and I don't even know why he was put on the national team committee by whoever to search for the coach that, would replace Pelobet. I don't know why that happened. Because yes, he and his committee came up with a list of recommendations, and then they got blindsided by Chung Myung-gyu, the president of the KFA, being like, we're hiring Jurgen Klinsmann.
That was probably the first warning sign that this was going to go south for the national team.
And so after, the Asian Cup went disastrously, the team played like crap every single game and got knocked out by Jordan, which is embarrassing for one of the best teams in Asia. And that's no disrespect to Jordan at all.
No, but we shouldn't be losing.
We shouldn't be losing to them, but they've made a lot of progress.
Yes.
But they fired Jurgen Klinsmann, reassigned Michael Moore to do some other things at the KFA, and maybe he'll get to do those other things that he's good at doing. But clearly, like, coming up with a list of manager recommendations that the people that run the KFA like, he's not good at doing that. Maybe he is still at the KFA, or maybe he has gone back home to Germany. We don't know. But it's neither here nor there, really, because he never really was given any real power or leverage or respect in what he does anyway, right? Like, does it really matter if he's there or not?
So I want to go back to the press conference today that was held in Seoul. Ho Won-so, who's an excellent Korean football reporter, is reporting that Lee was able to exercise full power over the final three candidates determined by the committee. Chung Hae-sung's resignation was probably the tipping point that allowed him to get so much power. Lee had interviews with two foreign candidates in Europe, which were Wagner and Poirier. And then he came back to Korea at the end of the week and talked with Hong Myung-bo at around 11 p.m. on July 5th. After Lee basically begged him to take the job, Hong gave his earnest reply at around 9 a.m. the next day. Like, what are we doing, man? You interview two candidates in Europe, and then you fly back to Korea. And then one day later, after you fly back, you've hired a different coach, and you told those other guys, hey, by the way, we're going in a different direction. I think it's the fact that Lee was crying during the press conference today, like he was trying his best to save Korean football, or that, he was on some noble crusade. I mean, I don't know the guy. I'm sure he has the best intentions, but to cry when you're appointing Hong Myung-bo as if you're appointing the second coming of Jesus isn't really a good look, I think. The Korean fans in the chat were totally roasting him, talking about how insincere that he seemed. While a lot of people are okay with the appointment of Hong. It's just such an uninspiring hire. It would have been better, I think, if we had hired Hong right after the Asian Cup. What frustrated me more was the fact that he said, "Hey, like, oh, well, we have 2 years. That's not enough for a foreigner to come in and put a stamp on the team. 2 years is a long time." Morocco fired their coach 6 months before the World Cup, and he got it together. Granted, he was a domestic manager, but still, 6 months. Germany fired Hansi Flick about a year before the Euros. Nagelsmann came in, stabilized things. There is no excuse on earth that I will believe that makes me believe them. And when they say that they had to hire a domestic coach, they didn't have to hire a domestic coach. They just did it because they blew money on Klinsmann. They're still paying out his staff for firing them, and they're still paying the costs of the new headquarters that they're building down in Cheonan. It just not only is it terrible human resources skills, I think they're awful at finances as well.
I'm gonna date myself like crazy here, and I don't think I've even watched this movie. But have you ever like seen that? Like maybe it's a meme now, but like I think it's maybe Patrick Swayze is the actor outside the door of a house, like of his ex-girlfriend with like a boombox, like begging her to get back with him.
I'm
I think the movie's called 16 Candles.
I've heard of 16 Candles. I don't know if Patrick Swayze was in it, but there's a meme with like a raccoon or a squirrel holding up a boombox.
Yeah, that. This feels like that. Like Lee Sang was like outside Hong Myung-bo's house, like, please, dude, meet with me.
Well,
meet
dude,
with me, man.
He was outside his house. Jason Schroeder.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a Korean news article that states that Lee Sang was waiting outside Hong Myung-bo's house until Hong agreed to meet with him. So they literally harassed this man to take the job.
Yeah, that's pretty desperate.
By the way, his wife doesn't want him to take the job, neither do his kids. They went through incredible mental anguish, I think, after the 2014 World Cup and the torment they received online, which makes me wonder, sorry to cut you off, Mike, it makes me wonder why Hong decided to take the job, whether it was because the KFA is giving him more power, more money, or if he really wanted the job all along and he was just pretending to the public and saying, oh, I'm not leaving Ulsan. I don't want to be the national team coach, when deep down he really did want the job.
Hong Myung-bo, if you're listening to this, come on our podcast. All right, you said some other things in that brief period that are also kind of important. Albert, how much should we pay in Jurgen and his staff?
The numbers have never been confirmed, and I don't know how much they're paying his assistants, but I know for sure they were paying Jurgen at least $2 million USD, a little more than 2 million, I think.
Per year, right?
Per year. For comparison, I think Paulo Bento made 1 point something.
Let's start doing some math. So Jurgen Klinsmann got a 4-year deal. He completed 1 year of it, and his early termination got him that other 6 mil. So they paid him out his full 8 million. I mean, his assistants can't be cheap. Like, It's got to be another couple mil.
Andy Kupke, the goalie coach, used to coach Germany for years. That guy's expensive as well. From what I've heard, I think from what Mong-gyu has actually said, I don't know if he's actually even paid out the money yet. I think the KFA might be in debt actually. So
yeah. So they are still paying Jurgen and Jurgen's staff. That's not a great look. All right, you talked about the new headquarters and training center of the KFA out in Cheonan. How much money did they just take out because construction costs and all that stuff is going over what they budgeted for?
So far, they've taken out around 30 billion won in loans, around 22.7 million US dollars.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the headquarters, because I think this is kind of a slept on topic that needs to kind of be talked about, because it also does show a really dysfunctional organization. Okay, so I'll kind of talk about what I know, and if you're watching this on YouTube or you've clicked a link on Twitter and you see this and you want to correct me, that's fine. Get in the comments. I'm cool with that. But essentially, the original Paju National Training Center for the KFA was constructed in about 2003, right? As a legacy of the 2002 World Cup. And so that was their headquarters. That was where all the training fields were. And that was where you reported for national team duty for the past 20 years. When they built that with Paju's, city government help, right? Because that's really how you do any building anywhere, really. Like, you have to get city government approval, right? They had a lease with Paju for 20 years. And that lease expired at the end of 2023. And the lease terms were great. The KFA wasn't paying rent to use that facility. But when the renewal terms came up, Paju was like, why don't you pay a yearly rent to use this facility? And apparently the KFA was not interested in that because a couple years ago, I can't remember when they started the plans or started the construction or whatever. They started working on their new National Training Center, which was supposed to be way better than the Paju one, was supposed to be way more modern. They'd flown in, the best architects from Europe to give them a real European training facility type feel. Like think of like the Clairefontaines of the worlds, the St. George's Parks of the worlds, right? They wanted something like that. So they'd started on that, but they didn't finish it in time. So now they don't have a training center. Albert, what is your thoughts on that?
They were training at a hotel before the Asian Cup. I mean, what are we, like, the Bahamas or something? Like,
yeah,
the Curacao or something? Like, we don't have the money to give our players proper facilities before Asian Cup. I mean, again, the headquarters, that's a whole nother topic, but I mean, it just shows again that the incompetence in this organization. Technically, HTC Group doesn't need to take out those loans. They have the money to pay for it. Just rich people don't like paying for stuff. But that's another topic. But it just shows the bad faith actors within this organization, the people who act in their own self-interest. There is nobody there that actually cares about progressing Korean soccer, or at least nobody in a position of power to steer this organization in the right direction. It's all about Mong-gyu's PR. It's about padding his pockets. It's about looking good to other countries. It's just a representation of what's wrong with this country as well. So it's disappointing. And you know what? I just, for me, the worst part today was the fact that at the press conference, Lee Sang was saying some crap about how he doesn't think Korea is able to play a high pressing style, and that he doesn't want us to play too risky, especially against these smaller Asian countries. Like, bro, what are you talking about? We have the players to play a high energy system. We should be pressing hard against these smaller Asian countries. It's against these bigger European countries or South American countries that you should bunker against, but you don't have to worry about that until the knockout rounds. He's acting as if you have to choose between one or the other. It's like you either have to park the bus all the time or play a mid block, or you have to press high and you can't be flexible. So his excuse for hiring Hong Myung-bo was that he basically said that Ulsan Hyundai, I believe, out of all 12 teams in the K-League, they were ranked around 10th in the amount of distance that was covered. Yet they still scored a ton of goals and won titles, which is a fair point, and I'm glad he did that research. But we have high attacking youthful energy players. We have Kang-in, dude can press. Cho Gyu-sung can press. Heung-min, I know he's getting old. He still looks pretty good physically. I think he can still press for another 2 years. For me, what he's saying is that, and I could be wrong, is that, okay, we're going to hire Hong Myung-bo. He's going to just play the old guys that he likes, Lee Jae-sung, Son Heung-min, Hwang Hee-chan. He's not going to call up that many new kids. And we're just going to go with what we've been doing and try to keep these veterans going for as long as we can and not tell them to press too much. Because Hong Myung-bo's main negative point from what I've heard from Ulsan fans is the fact that he never played the young guys at Ulsan. He was very reliant on veterans. He was reluctant to change his tactics, very stubborn. And we do have proof of that at the 2014 World Cup. Playing Chung Sung-ryung as a goalie when he was probably the worst goalie in the entire world. Playing Park Ji-young as the number 9 when he literally played 0 minutes, I think, that year for Arsenal. And this is why I've been against hiring a domestic manager in the first place. I don't want a Korean because, especially if they're so famous like Hong, they're too embedded in the system. They know the guys, they have personal relationships with them. And while that's good, that can work to your detriment. You're not going to be objective when it comes to dropping guys who need to be dropped, whether it's because of form or age. You're not going to clear out older guys who shouldn't be called up anymore, right? What Julian Nagelsmann did with Germany, what I give him credit for, is that he looked at the national team and said, okay, you know what? Hansi Flick was too close to a lot of these players. He'd been around the system for a long time. He was calling up guys from Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund because he had personal relationships with them and he was comfortable with them. He said, no, I'm going to clear out the sludge. I'm going to call up guys from Hoffenheim, Stuttgart, Leverkusen, guys who don't have a lot of experience with the national team but are playing well and are in form and deserve to get called up. My fear is that Hong Myung-bo will be more Hansi Flick than Julian Nagelsmann. Beggars can't be choosers, but again, these 2 years are really crucial for us in the sense that we need to clear out some of these veteran players and start transitioning some younger ones, especially if we're serious about winning that 2027 Asian Cup in Saudi Arabia. And I could be wrong, but I don't think Hong is the guy for that job.
I think we've kind of like gotten there where we need to start analyzing like, who is Hong Myung-bo? What is he going to do? Like we've talked about a lot of the KFA problems. And can I just say one last thing about the KFA? Just pay the fucking rent on the pageant. Like, just let us train there again. Just pay the fucking rent on it, dude. Gosh. Like, just, that makes me so mad. All right. Let's talk about Hong Myung-bo. His 2014 World Cup was very, very disappointingly bad. Could it have been better? Absolutely. He was coming off of 2 years before that, he had won Korea's only ever Olympic football medal. And that was a huge achievement. It's very possible, and it seems likely, he just decided that all the players that had won him the bronze medal at the Olympics could also do the job at the World Cup. And he was in for a very rude awakening that was not true. At the 2012 Olympics, Park Ji-young was his striker, and that worked out to some extent. Park Ji-young did fine at the Olympics, but it's also because Park Ji-young was 28. He was playing against a bunch of 23-year-olds who didn't know how to defend him.
Olympic soccer is not. We cannot compare it to.
It's not a comparable thing, right?
We can't.
And then also Park Ji-young and other of strikers that were there, like Iguno, was Ji Dong-won at the 2014 World Cup?
He was. Came off as a sub a few times.
Yeah, okay. Ji Dong-won was never really that great. I mean, he literally was a bum. I never thought that guy would amount to anything.
He's just big.
Yeah. But anyway, so relying on some of those strikers was kind of ridiculous. The sample size and when you'd seen them perform was not the kind of football that you were going to at the World Cup. So that was a really flawed argument, or a flawed tactical selection matter. So he's going to have to grow past that. But the big problem, or the big red flag with Hong Myung-bo, is that his Ulsan HD side still has a lot of those same players. Lee Chung-young plays for him still. Kim Yong-kwon plays for him. Kim Ki-hee plays for him. Ju Min-gyu plays for him, and Ju Min-gyu is 35. This guy likes playing veterans, and that's fine if it wins you the K-League, but the K-League and international football matches, two different things. The big concern with Hong Myung-bo is he has never proven that he can win international senior level football matches, especially because he was also not in charge of the 2014 World Cup qualifying cycle. He was flown in for that job right before the tournament.
The people glazing this higher, I don't understand it. It's like you said, Mike, literally the one calling card that he has in international football is the bronze medal at the Olympics. Thank you. You got the exemption. But again, if we're going by that standard, then Kim Hak-bom is one of the greatest managers of all time in South Korea. Hwang Sun-hong is a great manager too, because they won gold at the Asian Games. And I think part of the reason is too, we want to be respectful to our legends. Hong Myung-bo is the greatest Korean center back defender of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Franz Beckenbauer of Asia. But does that mean he's a great manager? I don't know. He's done well, like you said, to win multiple K-League titles at Ulsan Hyundai. I think he is a good leader. But again, does that translate to the national team? Can he make objective decisions about older guys who shouldn't be playing anymore? Can he find a balance between playing young players who should be given a chance and getting rid of some veterans that shouldn't be on the team anymore? His track record has shown that he's definitely not. He's not willing to do that. So when people are saying, when even people say that this is a safe hire, I don't even know if it's a safe hire. The Ulsan Hyundai team that he has, they won titles, but towards the second half of every season, it seemed like they went into a major tailspin, and they won the title because they had created such a large point lead at the beginning of the year. But those were also in seasons when I think the top half of the K-League table wasn't that good. This year, Ulsan is in second place right now. The top half is very competitive. You got Pohang, who's a lot better than they were in past years. Kim Cheon-sangmu, the military team, is stacked as well. So I don't know. It's we'll get out of the group stage because I think he's competent enough for that. But will we make it to the quarterfinals, which is my minimum target for 2026? Winning in the round of 16. I don't know. And my fear is that we're going to see the same old guys: Choi Yeon-woo in net, Kim Young-kwon starting in the center of defense, Hwang Hee-chan on the left side, Hwang In-bum, Lee Jae-sung in the middle of the park. And to people who love those players, okay, fine, but we'll see what happens. If you want to take that risk, go ahead. Usually national teams fail at big tournaments, even if they have talent, because they start guys who are veterans who shouldn't be playing anymore.
I mean, it's what happened to Uruguay at this past World Cup. So when we started recording this podcast, I hadn't changed my tune on Hong Myung-bo yet. But as we've been talking, I mean, y'all can hear me. I've gotten a lot more annoyed about it. So yeah, he's kind of I think it's the way that I'm kind of looking at him is he's got to prove it. Like, you want to be the national team manager, you want to do a good job, you want to show us that you've evolved since 10 years ago, and that you know how to pick the right players, you know how to judge who's informed from your national team pool, you know how to show that you have evolved tactics that's going to work on the international stage, prove it.
Maybe let's talk about his tactics. His tactics aren't even that revolutionary, and we don't need a revolutionary coach, but let's talk about it. He uses standard 4-2-3-1, a double pivot in front of the defense, a number 9, and then a front 3 that likes to interchange positions. That's what he used at Ulsan. That's what he's used at the World Cup in Brazil. Personally, in my opinion, I think a 4-3-3 suits this current national team a lot better. I don't think you can play Hwang-in-bo with just one other midfielder next to him. He needs at least 2 guys there, one to screen and one to get up and down to help him. And I think that we work better with the striker playing with the wingers closer to him instead of being higher up by himself, because I think Heung-min also likes to cut inside at times. So even tactically speaking, he wasn't a guy that I would have hired for the profile. The only argument that you can make, I think, to say Hong Myung-bo is the manager for this team is because he's a legend and the players respect him, and he will bring some order to a locker room that was obviously in chaos because Jurgen Klinsmann was totally incompetent.
That's something that we do need to think about, because if we're switching from 4-3-3 or something kind of like that somewhat resembles a 4-3-3 to like that type of system, you're gonna have to pick different players. So in the 4-2-3-1, the one top up top, it's likely going to be either Oh Se-hoon or Cho Gyu-sung, whichever one of those 2 guys is playing better. If we're taking Ju Min-gyu to the World Cup in the US, like, that's ridiculous. We'll know that there's a failure there. Cho Gyu-sung or Oh Se-hoon may be up top. Oh Hyung-gyu is not a traditional like one top. He can't play that. That's not his style. So he's clearly not going to be going. Even Jo Gyu-sung and Oh Se-hoon as one tops, right? They're limited players. We're not really sure where their ceiling is, if what they're going to hit, and if they're going to be good. So that position, we're not sure about. Okay, so the 3 behind it, right? So 4-2-3-1, you've got that central attacking guy, and then the right wing, left wing, right? So, Albert, what do you think those 3 guys would be? Who would you want them to be? Don't think about who Hong Myung-bo would like, but who would you want them to be?
I play Salt on the left side. I put Pejino in the middle and the Kang-in on the right side. And to people who say judo's better on the left, it doesn't matter at that point. Let them all rotate positions because there are going to be times when Kang-in wants to come in the middle. There's going to be times when Shudo wants to shift out wide, and there's going to be times when Sonny wants to come to the middle too. So put those 3 there and let them figure it out.
And then you have Hee-chan just as a bench guy, right?
Super sub.
I'm just going to say this. If you're playing a 4-2-3-1, we're not playing Hwang In-bum from the start anymore. It's not going to work. It's just not. He can come off the bench. He can be the backup to Bejino in the middle as the center attacking midfielder. But a starter in a 4-2-3-1, that's not going to work. You're going to probably want someone like, you're going to have to like pray to the stars that Kwon Hyuk-gyu starts playing good CDM stuff in Europe. Okay? And then probably you're also going to need someone like
Park Ji-seop has to be there.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, Park Jin-seop, that's a good idea. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for helping me with that. So those 2 guys make sense as like two stoppers, right? And so what this means is that likely a huge favorite and the vice captain of the national team, Lee Jae-sung, is not a starter anymore. Think about if that's actually happening.
Lee Jae-sung can't play the double pivot.
No, he can't. He can't play anymore anyway. I haven't seen Lee Jae-sung play good since the World Cup, man.
Alan might get mad at you, but I mean, Hwang In-bo can't play a double pivot. He can't. The whole point of 4-2-3-1 is both of those double pivots. When one of them goes up, one of them has to cover, and vice versa. I think, honestly, with the 4-2-3-1, I probably play Hong Yeon-suk on the left side and Park Jin-seop on the right. Hong, I think, still is a bit younger, but still a little more defensively responsible, I think, than Hwang In-bo ever was. So I think those 2 in the middle of the park, kind of recycling possession, and then either Lee Kang-in or Pejino a little up higher next to them will be perfect. And again, there's no space for Hwang In-bo or Lee Jae-sung, which could be blasphemous, but guys, like, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Just because they're good players doesn't mean they should all be at the 11.
I mean, there's 26 spots on the roster now. It's not a problem if you don't make the starting 11 anymore. You're still getting some spots. Back 4, we're going to be looking at So Young-woo. Hong Myung-bo knows that guy. And he got that guy to where he is.
I think
that's
he's
great.
An excellent inverted left back. That's where I put him.
Yeah. Kim Min-jae, that's a really good player. His partner, we're still Not sure who that's going to be, but if Hong Myung-bo is going to be trotting out Kim Young-kwan at that World Cup, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a big red flag, and that's going to blow up in his face. Lee Han-bum moved to Midtjylland with Cho Kyu-sung and then doesn't play there. So we'll see if his second season he starts playing for the first team and like actually gets minutes and starts. Or Kim Ji-soo, who just got promoted to the first team. We don't really know what that means in terms of minutes because he was put on a first team bench multiple times last Premier League season and did not play. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things up in the air for this national team squad. There's a lot of questions and sort of problems that Hong Myung-bo is going to have to fix, and we're not sure he can fix them, right, Albert? Like, are you sure?
No. And the bigger thing for me is the center backs too, but also who he calls up for the goalie position. I think the biggest sin that he made in 2014 was starting Chung Sung-young.
Yeah.
To be fair, that he put Kim Seung-gyu in for that third game against Belgium, and it was a lot better. If I see Cho Yeon-woo, Sung Bum-gun as the two main guys again, and even if I see Kim Seung-gyu again after he recovers from his ACL, like I'm going to be pissed. Not to say they shouldn't be called up, but there has to be a new set, at least one or two new guys in that goalie room, just to freshen things up and also to see what you have. Because we do have a bunch of good young goalkeepers coming up in the K-League that deserve a look. You got guys like Kim Dong-jun at Jeju, who's older, but he's played well for a while. Kim Jun-hong, Jeonbuk, Lee Kwang-yeon at Kangwon. So that's going to be really telling for me. His first call-ups in September, because right now it's only July. He's going to have some time to scout the K-League and see what he likes. If we see the roster littered with veteran players and his favorites from Ulsan, then we're kind of going to see, like, it's going to be easy to tell where this thing is going to go.
Before we end this podcast, do you want to just, like, give us some of your red flags that you don't want him to call up?
I don't want to see Chung Woo-young Sr. on the national team. Kim Do-hoon calling him up last time, I kind of get it because it was only for 2 games, but he shouldn't be anywhere near this national team. Kim Young-won, love you, brother, but it's over. Those two should not get called up anymore. Kim Jin-soo. His behavior recently on the pitch has been quite problematic. His performances on the pitch haven't been up to snuff as well. Yeah, those are the 3 guys that I do not want to see on this team. Kim Jin-soo, Chung Woo-young Sr., and Kim Young-kwan. Then, like I said, I'll be looking at the goalies, the goalkeepers that he picks, because that's going to tell you a lot about whether he's learned from his past mistakes.
I don't need to see Won-sang making this national team just because he's a good player at Ulsan HD and has been good for them for the past couple of years. I don't need to see it. Nothing about Won-sang's style of play or just his anything really tells me he's any better than Song Min-gyu or Lee Seung-woo or like Jung Woo-young from Stuttgart. There's a lot of players that you could select other than Won-sang. And if Hong Myung-bo is coming out with that guy because that guy's been playing him for the past couple of years, that's a real red flag. I don't really need to see any more of Won-sang. Won-sang has had a lot of potential for a long time. And if he was going to like actually turn into a good player that's worthy of being on the senior national team and getting a starter job or being a really important piece for this national team, a European club would have seen that and signed him. The floor is what it is, and the ceiling isn't that high. Okay? We know what we're getting with this kid. He's in his mid-20s. It's not going to get better. Another guy also, like Na Sang-ho also. Bringing that dude back into the mix would also be a little bit weird. I know Na Sang-ho has never played for Hong Myung-bo at all, but it's another player where it's like, you know what you're getting, and you know what the potential is not higher than what it is right now. So why would you be bringing him in? Especially because Na Sang-ho is in his mid-20s, playing in Japan, like whatever, right? So those are 2 other guys I'm like, I don't want to see them added back in. Oh, this is actually a good question. Okay, Albert, who are some players that if Hong Myung-bo called them in, you would be encouraged by his tenure?
Lee Seung-woo.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking.
He's been one of the top 3-5 players in the K-League this whole season. Basically dragging Suwon FC to near the top of the table. Kind of been out in the wilderness for whatever reason with Paulo Bento and Jurgen Klinsmann. But he's a perfect joker to put on late in the match when legs are tired and you need just a direct player. He's not a player that you have a lot of in this KNT. You have more ball to foot players like Bae Jun-ho and Lee Kang-in, right? A little more tricky, whereas sometimes you just need that little demon to try to just break through the walls directly. I'd be very encouraged if he called him up again, especially because I'm pretty sure he's known Lee Seung-woo for a very long time, and he's kept an eye on him when he's played Suwon. So that's the one name that I'd be very encouraged if he called up again to the national team.
I would be encouraged if he brings Yang Min-hyuk to the national team right off the bat in September. It's just like I'm going to show y'all that I play young dudes, and I can recognize that this young kid is one of the best players in the K-League this season so far. That would be really cool. Another one is a center back, Lee Ki-hyuk from Kangwon. Trey, yeah. Trey and Aaron have been saying really good things about Kangwon as a team. So getting a couple Kangwon guys into this mix would be really cool. Lee Kwang-yeon, their goalkeeper, another encouraging pick. Even just calling up Lee Han-bum and Kim Ji-soo to see what they have for you, regardless of if they're playing at the beginning of the season. Like, you need to find out if those two guys in 2 years can start with Kim Min-jae. You need to find that out as quick as possible. That's one of your biggest missions right away off the bat. At the 2022 World Cup, one of the biggest problems for Kim Min-jae was not that like Kim Young-kwon is a bad defender. That's not it. It's just that he's getting older. And so Kim Min-jae had to work twice as hard as he would have if he had a younger center back working with him. For me, like one of the first missions for Hong Myung-bo is figure out if there is actually a younger center back that can pair with Kim Min-jae. And if you just decide that that's not possible for you to do, that's a huge red flag for me.
Well, we'll see. I mean, he's got 2 months, like we said, to figure it out. It's interesting to me that Hong Myung-bo wasn't even at the press conference today. It was mostly Lee Im-sang talking to the press, so that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting few months. I think it's clear that it's going to be hard to fuck up Asian qualifying, especially with the expanded format. So Hong Myung-bo will be the coach for us in 2026. I just hope that he's learned from his mistakes. Because I'll say this, man, if he craps his pants again and crashes out of the group stage twice in both his stints as the national team manager, his legacy as a player will always be fine. But his legacy as a manager and what younger generations of Koreans will think of him is going to be a lot different than what his legacy should be. And I know some people will say that's unfair. You can't judge a guy based on recent history. Unfortunately, that's the way sports works. It's a what have you done for me lately business. I'm telling you right now, this is a huge legacy-defining tournament for him as a manager because he wanted it again. You know, he said for years, I didn't want it again. I don't want to be back. He's like, well, now he's back. So show us that it was better to hire a domestic manager than a foreigner.
You kind of briefly touched on it and you kind of glossed over it, but I do want to talk about the upcoming expanded AFC format because this will also give me like an idea of whether this guy's a success or not. Korea will be playing in a hexagonal group, which they didn't used to do in the final round. They used to just have 3 teams in their group. They'll be playing in a hexagonal group against, a bunch of teams from the Middle East. And the top 2 of those teams go to the World Cup in 2026 direct. If we don't finish 1 or 2 and Hong Myung-bo has to keep going and go to the next round of qualifying or go to the playoffs, that's when we know that this is going to be a disaster. Guys, in 1 year, Korea should be qualified for the World Cup in first place in their group, and that should be that. If that's not what happens, then we kind of know Hong Myung-bo's not the right guy. And then we should have a full year to start playing friendlies with people, preparing for this thing, and seeing if Hong Myung-bo's got the stuff to actually do it at the World Cup.
It's going to be an interesting 2 years, guys. Seems like a long time away, but honestly, 2 years does go by pretty fast. And we'll be here at Beam Ballers and Fighting Stripes Football to cover the latest. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Plug our social media on the description. Follow us on Twitter. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for listening.